He told the United States that we control the United States. So Israel is now moving towards a destiny already proclaimed long ago, that a Pax Judaica will replace Pax Americana.
Thinking about how you survive in a modern era, of course, especially within the light of this eschatology and wanting to know, what the signs are, what will happen, so that you could align yourself with the good. Because I guess one of the things that, whether you're Muslim or Christian, you don't want to end up on the wrong side of this eschatological, analysis. I mean, there is the dark side, of course, that we now have to mention, because along with the notion of Imam Mahdi and the Messiah coming, Jesus Christ, there's also Sufyani and Dajjal. What's your take on the Sufyani and the Dajjal?
I have never even mentioned the name Sufyani. I do not comment on Sufyani. I will only take those hadiths which I feel some measure of an assurance that I understand. The rest of the hadiths, I leave it to those more learned than myself. Let them comment on it. Don't comment. So yes, I can comment on Dajjal, but I can't comment on Sufyani.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the Dajjal, he precedes the Mahdi and Christ. Is that the way it works in Islam? And then where does the Dajjal or the Antichrist within the Christian tradition come in?
Answer: the Antichrist is Dajjal. The Christian Antichrist is Dajjal, the false Messiah. Answer: he wants to impersonate the true Messiah. And in order to impersonate the true Messiah, he has to rule the world from Jerusalem. In order to rule the world from this Jerusalem, he has to employ the most sophisticated deception you could ever dream of. That's why he got the name Dajjal. Among his most dangerous deception, through which he eventually gets to rule the world, is his capacity to enslave mankind. And that's where we are heading. Neither the Shia world of Islamic scholarship nor the Sunni world of Islamic scholarship, and least of all that miserable state called Pakistan, ruled by Yankee puppy dogs, none of them understand how he's moving incrementally towards enslaving all of mankind with a bogus monetary system. A bogus monetary system and a bogus and deceptive banking system. I have been to Iran several times. I have met with the Ayatollahs, and only two Ayatollahs. One, may Allah have mercy on his soul, a very noble, oh, what a noble man he was, Ayatollah Shirazi. I met him in Qom, and such a humble man, and such a brilliant man, who understood the subject of riba. And me, I will take hours and hours and hours to explain the subject. And this man sat down with me and with two jugs, one with water and one with lemonade. And in 10, 15 minutes, he explained the subject of riba in such a way that was so beautiful. May Allah have mercy on his soul, because he's passed away now. That Ayatollah understood the danger of riba that Iran does not understand. And an Ayatollah bin Asadi in Shiraz, and he had no qualms in talking to me and saying to me about the Iranian rial and the Iranian Toma. He said, this is the heart of all the evil of this country. The very heart. And then I met some of the most advanced ayatollahs in Iran. And speaking to them on the subject of money was like speaking to a stone wall. They had no knowledge of the subject, and their minds were blocked from the subject. And so many ayatollahs were saying to me, Sheikh, you must meet with the Rahbar, the Ayatollah Khamenei. Sheikh, if you go and speak to him and explain to him that this paper money is bogus, it's fraudulent, it's haram, then he can change the whole system in Iran.
Yeah.
I said, I'll never do such a thing.
Well, this is touching on what I think could be linked to the Dajjalic system, because Dajjal, on the one hand, from the eschatological little I know, he is a physical character. He's a being. He's a person, an individual. Some even describing him as having a one eye, and there are all sorts of descriptions that are linked to him. But the run-up to the coming of Dajjal fascinates me. And you talk about riba, you talk about systems, you talk about the idea of Jerusalem and the Dajjal perhaps being there. And we live in times now where red heifers are being potentially sacrificed in Jerusalem by that other strand of monotheistic eschatology or Abrahamic eschatology, which is our Jewish brethren. You actually met with two of these gentlemen and discussed various things. I didn't want to bring them into it, but it seems that now you've raised this issue of the Dajjal and the current system, where we know that Christian Zionism actually is totally rooted in the idea of pushing for the Jewish version of the end of times, and they have their take on it, and that's very different from what the guys, the Room Fraternity of Russia that you talk about. What's your take on that? Do you think that actually this is all part of the evolution towards the Dajjal? Because you've also talked in your writings and your discourses about Pax Britannica leading to Pax Americana, and us now moving into Pax Judaica. Is it connected?
Well, I cannot comment on Christian eschatology. I told you that before. I prefer that they explain their eschatology. However, my studies in Islamic eschatology have led me to the conclusion that when the Quran speaks in this ayah mutashabiha, meaning there are two kinds of verses in the Quran, and the second is a verse which cannot be understood unless it is interpreted. However, don't make the mistake of ever interpreting the Quran and claiming you're correct. Don't be a fool. Don't create a sectarian movement on such foolishness. None at all. When you interpret the Quran, always say Allah knows best. Because only Allah, not even the Rahbar, only Allah can confirm that an interpretation is correct. So the Quran speaks in Surah Al-Mursalat, and it warns those who have rejected the truth about the Messiah in particular. Warn them, prepare now for a shadow which will comprise of three parts. Ba'adawuz billahi min ash-shaytanir rajim. Intaliku ila zillin. Zill means a shadow. The thalatha shu'ab. Thalatha means three. Shu'ab means a shadow.
Three shadows.
So prepare for a shadow comprised of three parts. I have interpreted that shadow to be Dajjal. Yes, I am the first. I don't know of anyone else in history of Islam who's done that. But that does not worry me at all. I am convinced that I am correct, but Allah knows best, and I don't want anyone to accept my view unless you are convinced that it is correct. And I'm not going to engage in any boxing match over the shadow.
Sure.
I consider the shadow to be comprised of three parts. So in my study of Dajjal, I do what no one else has done.
Which is?
I always look for footprints of Dajjal appearing in three parts. And so when I saw, like a student of international relations, I saw the emergence for the first time in history of an actor appearing on the stage of history. Never before. Suddenly this actor appears on the stage of history and commands the stage. And that was Britain. Napoleon had such contempt for Britain. He referred to Britain as a nation of shopkeepers. And yet Britain commands the stage. By 1914, when the First World War took place, can you imagine that this little island, a nation of shopkeepers, commanded the seas of the world?
Yes, incredible.
Commanded control over every significant naval port in the whole world. Is this by accident? If so, then I should eat my biryani and go home and sleep.
Yeah.
And continue what Iqbal has said. Don't bother to think. There's no use in thinking. Knowledge is a package. The knowledge of the Qur'an is a package. The package is already sealed. All you have to do is to transfer this package from one generation to the other, whether it be Darul this or Darul that or Qum. You just have to transfer it mechanically. That is what Iqbal said about contemporary Islamic scholarship. I said, no, the shadow is Dajjal. And therefore, this is the first stage of the shadow, because I see Britain with an unnatural and inexplicable obsession with Jerusalem, obsession with the Holy Land. And then when Britain became the ruling state in the world, it was not only on the basis of military power. A military power which had at its foundation a scientific and technological revolution on which I could speak for some time, but we don't have that time.
No.
Britain became Pax Britannica also because of control over money. Removing gold and silver from the market and replacing it with paper, parading as money with a fictitious value, paper money. And the British sterling pound becomes the international currency, and all the sheep and cattle and goats and camels in the world with nothing in their head except peanuts accepted it as money. That was the first stage.
The first shadow.
Stages of the shadow. And then as a student of international affairs, I saw the mysterious movement of Pax Britannica to Pax Americana. Britain is not so secure because Britain is off the coast of Europe, just the English Channel. Dajjal needed something more secure to do his wickedness. So he goes across the Atlantic Ocean and he finds a huge land out there with a nice, lovely people living there. And these people had so much respect for nature that no one will pump sewage into a river. No one will pump sewage into a river. No, these people.
Native Americans
worship the river. And these people are treated as subhuman. And they're exterminated. We are the chosen people of the Lord God. And they exterminated them like cockroaches. This is Dajjal's work for Pax Americana. And now you need to build overnight. You need to build the most powerful state in the world. You can't do that with normal construction methods. You cannot do that with normal construction methods. So you need to enslave millions of Africans. Millions of Africans have to work as slaves to build America overnight into the most powerful state in the world. You need slaves to build your new country.
Sure.
And then the United States of America has a US dollar which replaces the sterling pound. And because I am not one of those who simply eat biryani and go home and sleep, I do a little bit of thinking. I realize that the United States of America is now Pax Americana, and the US dollar has replaced the British pound because you need control over money to control the world, to rule the world. He wants to rule the world. He wants to rule the world from Jerusalem. So he begins by ruling the world from Britain, and then he moves to Britain, ruling the world from the United States in order eventually to rule the world from Jerusalem. This is my Islamic eschatology. This is how I understand Surah Al-Mursalat, but I still remain a solitary voice crying in the wilderness of Islamic scholarship.
Well, that's absolutely extraordinary and fascinating to see how you've linked it to the real world. So that, in a way, means that Pax Judaica is the final iteration of the Dajjalic shadow, as you say. And you'd imagine that now that Benjamin Netanyahu is literally saying that yesterday's comments I picked up were talking about Israel becoming a primary power, not a secondary power. So he's almost declaring that we're going to be superseding American power with Greater Israel or with this Pax Judaica. That's very much something that they're dreaming about. That seems to be also a possibility, because the technological hub in Israel also makes me think about this, because the miraculous happenings or the powers of Dajjal are often listed within the eschatology, and it's sort of often really very, very miraculous things that he can do, and all sorts of things. And of course, with the digital age, with the coming of nanotechnology, with the coming of all of the other sophisticated scientific discoveries that we have and capabilities, things that we couldn't even have dreamt of many years ago. I mean, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq al-Islam, I think he says in one of his hadith, he says that that time will be one where a believer in the East will be able to visually see a believer in the West. So indicating that there was some connection, something we can do today. I mean, I don't always like to connect hadith to scientific realities today, but that's one that I came across. So is it that in this Pax Judaica period, we're going to get a Dajjal emerging in his full form, and then that becomes the sign that Imam Mahdi and Jesus Christ, or the Messiah, will also be returning? Do you think we're in that period now?
The timeline of events, but first of all, before we return to the timeline of events, Netanyahu is only echoing what Ariel Sharon said about 30 years ago.
I see.
If Netanyahu is now saying we want to be a primary power rather than a secondary power, Ariel Sharon, as Prime Minister of Israel, about 30 years ago, he said, we control the United States. That's right. He told the United States that we control the United States. So Israel is now moving towards a destiny already proclaimed long ago, that a Pax Judaica will replace Pax Americana. This is what is to be found in my book, Jerusalem in the Quran, written 25 years ago. And my world of Islamic scholarship has remained embarrassingly silent in response to my book all the 25 years. You could give them another 25 years, they'll still remain in the cement of bewilderment. I call it methodological bewilderment. Now then, back to the timeline of events. Our Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, spoke as only a prophet could speak. And he was speaking to his companion Mu'az ibn Jabal, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And these are his words. Umran Bayt al-Maqdis, Kharabu Yathrib, that when Jerusalem is built up, when Jerusalem, therefore, is center stage in the world, built up, for me, center stage in the world, they'll say, which hadith says that? That is what they say. Which hadith says that? So forget them. Forget them. Forget them. When Jerusalem is built up, Umran Bayt al-Maqdis, for me, when Jerusalem is center stage in the world, Kharabu Yathrib. Yathrib, which is now Medina, would be Kharab. Kharab means destroyed. For me, in solitude, playing no role in the world, playing absolutely no role in the world. This is Medina today. Kharabu Yathrib, Khurujul Malhama. When Medina is in full-on desolation, at that time the Malhama will take place, or Armageddon. And we know that it's going to be a war using weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons. We know that. Why? Because our Prophet said 99 of every 100 combatants will be killed. Conventional war does not do that. Then he went on to say, Khuruj al-Malhama, Fathul Constantinia. That when the Malhama takes place, or Armageddon, the next event to occur would be the conquest of Constantinople.
By whose, Sheikhna?
A Muslim army. The Taftahanna al-Constantinia. You will most certainly conquer Constantinople. وَلَنِعْمَ الْأَمِيرُ آمِرُهَا وَلَنِعْمَ الْجَيْشُ ذَلِكَ الْجَيْشُ. And he praised the commander, and he praised the army. Now then, the conquest of Constantinople, prophesied by Prophet Muhammad والسلام, is a conquest which will take place after the Great War. The whole of mankind, except the Turkish people, all of mankind, except the Turkish people, and those in the Balkans who worship Turkey, all of mankind know that the Great War has not yet taken place. I can't do anything for the Turkish people, whether they're on the secular side or on the Ottoman side. Both of them, I can't do anything for them. Let them remain where they are. A hopeless people. The Great War will take place, and then after that, one hadith says 7 months, the other says 7 years. After that comes the conquest of Constantinople. So the two most important cities in the end time are Jerusalem and Constantinople. These are the two most important cities in the end time. Constantinople is important because of the relationship that must exist between this Ummah and this Ummah. The Ummah which follows Muhammad والسلام, and the Ummah which follows Jesus. Therefore, the Muslim world and the Christian world. These two Ummahs have to come together in friendship and alliance in preparation for the return of the Messiah. And the key city in that reconciliation and friendship and alliance between the two Ummahs is Constantinople. Because when a Muslim army conquers Constantinople, then we will return Hagia Sophia to those to whom it rightfully belongs. And Sultan Erdogan cannot stop it. Tell that to him for me.
I'll call him.
After a Muslim army conquers Constantinople, and there's reconciliation between these two ummahs, and this is one of the things my book is doing. This book is built trying to bring reconciliation between the Christian, Orthodox Christian, and Muslims. After this reconciliation takes place, only then does Dajjal emerge.
That's when Dajjal. Okay.
Only then does Dajjal emerge in human form. But as soon as Dajjal emerges in human form, and he declares, I am the Messiah, my opinion, and you don't have to accept my opinion unless you're convinced I am correct. My opinion is that Allah will only now send the Imam, not before. The Imam will be sent only after Dajjal has completed his mission of impersonating the Messiah and taking the Banu Israel to the destruction. Then the Imam emerges, and the Imam establishes the Khilafah state in Mecca. But when the Imam emerges, and before the Imam, I don't know whether the Imam would have established the Khilafah state or not yet. Maybe he would have done it. Then Allah will send Nabi Isa alayhi salam. This is the timeline of events.